AI is starting to drive a profound shift in the workplace. The skills that we've prioritized for decades are becoming automated, with uniquely human capabilities beginning to emerge as the true differentiators. So, are your hiring and development strategies still focused on what machines can already do, or are you investing in the skills that AI can't replicate? Support for this podcast comes from Indeed. They're a brand that I'm sure you all know as the hiring and matching platform where employers can connect with over 580 million job seeker profiles. But did you also know that their front row seat to the global economy gives them a massive data set which you can access for free? This allows you to see the latest information on job postings, salary trends, and much more. Or did you know that Indeed's new AI tools make it easier than ever for you to find and connect with active and passive job seekers? There's much more to Indeed. Visit Indeed.com.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 685 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. The rapid evolution of AI is starting to reshape the skills landscape, but it's already becoming clear that many employers are going to struggle to adapt. While hard skills have traditionally dominated hiring and development strategies, it's becoming increasingly clear that soft skills like communication, critical thinking, empathy, and adaptability are the true differentiators in an AI-dominated workplace. However, most organizations don't know how to properly define, measure, or develop these soft skills, leaving them vulnerable to skill shortages in the human capabilities that they need to drive their future success. So, how can companies identify and nurture the skills that AI can't replicate? My guest this week is Dan Hayward, Chief Customer Officer at Go1, one of the world's leading learning content aggregators. Dan shares valuable insights on how the skills landscape is evolving and why soft skills are becoming increasingly critical as AI starts to take over the more technical and repetitive tasks. Hi, Dan, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
An absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Please, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Dan Hayward. I have the pleasure of being the Chief Customer Officer at Go1. Go1 is the world's content expert with the largest learning ecosystem. We really focus our efforts on powering the pursuit of potential. So essentially, I've been here for a couple of years now. My background for the past 30 years is in HR. Started out in L&D, moved across into talent acquisition and all things talent brand, talent management for about 15 years. And then the last 15 years, I've been working actually in the SaaS industry in HR tech. So I work for LinkedIn and some other learning providers along the way.
Awesome. It's a really interesting background there. Sounds like you've been in kind of all different bits of talent.
Yeah, for sure. It's been I kind of often describe it as having three careers. I've kind of enjoyed each of them, but very much kind of like L&D, kind of nuts and bolts right at the start of my career. And then was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time when job boards arrived the first time, way back in the early 90s, and then kind of switched over into social media recruiting when that kind of started to really kind of take off in the kind of late 2010. So yeah, it's been a fantastic journey. It's also taken me across the world. So I'm originally from the UK, but I've kind of moved further west with every role. So now I'm in San Francisco. There's only Hawaii left.
I was going to say there's not many places left to go. So let's talk about skills, because it's just such an interesting time in the world of work at the moment with everything that's going on with AI and all of these kind of things. I mean, how is the demand for skills evolving in this sort of AI world that we now seem to be living in?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And certainly over the last 2 years, I think we've all experienced the kind of significant emphasis and focus on AI skills. Maybe 2 years ago, there was a little bit of doom and gloom, kind of thinking that AI is going to take over the world, and then it became very clear that what we needed were skills that enable us to work with AI. So one of the things that I'm really noticing when I'm speaking to our customers is the reemergence and the focus on soft skills. So those non-technical skills, which are more kind of interpersonal, so such as kind of communication and collaboration, that help people to effectively adapt to kind of the workplace.
I mean, I think that's really interesting, and it's something that's consistently coming across in lots of the conversations that I'm having, whether they're called soft skills or durable skills or whatever it might be. I want to talk a little bit more about that in the context of the workplace in a second. Before we do, though, do you think that the education systems that we currently have are properly preparing people for this new world of work where different skills are needed than perhaps we've taught people in the past?
So I think that kind of the short answer is no. And I think we're definitely seeing that with, the impact of kind of remote working, the acceleration of that through kind of the COVID era. And I think kind of it's definitely a conversation that I think we're starting to see a lot more of in the educational space around kind of different innovative approaches that schools can take. I think there is definitely a lag, and I think a lot of employers are seeing kind of those entry-level employees with that skills gap. But some of the things that certainly here in California where I live, my son's in middle school, and they do a class called enrichment. And essentially it's actually focused on anything that the child is interested in. It's a semester, but it's really designed to focus them on like more of a project-based learning approach. So focus on teamwork. They have to kind of innovate and ideate on kind of what it is that the project that they're going to lead. It could be anything. And then there's some loose structure around it, but it really helps kind of facilitate that real world collaboration that we see. So I think kind of, where we're seeing in the educational space, people lean into this, it really is kind of embracing that kind of more experiential kind of learning, whether that's kind of role playing or simulations kind of as a part of the curriculum, thinking about kind of that project-based learning that I mentioned. So kind of creating that simulation of kind of real work collaboration. And certainly I know, I have a couple of older kids too who have been through into the workplace. And I can see how hard it is when they're faced with challenge or kind of like a difference of opinion for the first time in the workplace, because that hasn't been something that my older kids have gone through their university experience. And then finally, I definitely think that I'm seeing a shift now from an education perspective where schools are starting to think about how can they teach students to work alongside AI while strengthening interpersonal skills. I think 2 years ago it was AI is the be all and end all. And now there's a real clear understanding that the real differentiator here is those interpersonal or soft skills or critical thinking skills that can accompany AI that's doing all the heavy lifting and the technical, more repeatable tasks.
That's really interesting. I mean, tell us a little bit more about that. How does that work in context? How are people thinking about AI, the kind of relation, I suppose, between humans and machines in that kind of context?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think as we've all seen, AI, I think our expectations for AI and where we are right now have somewhat been moderated, in my opinion. I think kind of certainly how myself and my teams and a lot of our customers are using AI is really focusing on those technical, more repetitive tasks. And I think the reality is that there are still some things that AI cannot easily replicate. And so, such as kind of creativity, emotional intelligence, interpersonal communication, it does a good job of mimicking, but I think there's a clear differentiation, I think, right now in terms of kind of like the efficiency and the effort that you're getting from AI to address kind of a lot of the kind of certainly in my world, it's a lot of consolidation. It's, note-taking, action recommendations, and those sorts of things. And then the ability to be able to communicate that to clients, partners, other project team members. And so I think that we're starting to see a little bit of that differentiation. But it also means that, the use of AI effectively means that, our employees have to be proficient in terms of that kind of collaboration, the kind of the human-machine collaboration. So a lot of effort on the prompting and how to leverage the tool for maximum efficiency, as opposed to, I think maybe, with the hype 2 or 3 years ago, this is a tool that's gonna take over. And so certainly there's kind of digital literacy, prompt literacy, and a lot of emphasis in terms of that kind of prompt techniques and how we essentially role play with AI, large language models, to get the most out of them, and continuous learning, because the tools that we have, the AI tools, are continuously progressing. But the flip side of that is there are still a lot of skills that even those, I think the CEO of NVIDIA, the large AI chip manufacturer, said that he would definitely recommend that his children don't become programmers. There's his focus would be on them at university, focusing on the soft skills, because that's the one area that even he realizes that the AI is not going to be able to easily replicate or match.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting what you said there about it being able to mimic creativity, but not actually be creative. And I think that's kind of a sort of a really core difference. And coming back to the workplace and soft skills, traditionally, lots of employers have not been really good at understanding these or kind of even defining them. So how do employers need to think about soft skills, amongst the talent they have, the talent that they're bringing into the organization? How do you actually define them?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think it definitely is easier to identify the technical skills gaps. And I think we all recognize that. But I definitely, in interaction with our customers, and obviously we have over 100,000 pieces of content within our platform from over 200 content providers that our customers leverage. So we get to see a lot of the data behind the scenes. And if I think about kind of what that's telling me, and then conversations around most common skills gap, typically it's showing up as kind of four groups of skill sets. So the first is around communications. So there's clearly an opportunity from face to face or human to human interactions. There's an opportunity there because for the past 5 years, a lot of us have been remote. We're starting to re-enter that workplace environment. So I think that's an area where, particularly for kind of new enroll or new to the workforce, that's a common gap in terms of so how can we help kind of inject some of that kind of in-person interactions that maybe digital communication has augmented or replaced today. The second group would be around kind of critical thinking and problem solving, and I'm pretty sure this is these themes have been consistent all the way through. But I think that the need has been enhanced somewhat by the human experience of the last kind of 4 to 5 years. Then kind of emotional intelligence, kind of and empathy, and again I think kind of the reality there is remote work and digital interactions have really limited our opportunity for that nuanced kind of social learning. I work remotely. I've been remote since March 2020. And when I have the opportunity to meet people in person, it's amazing how much more connected, how much more productive, etc. that I feel and we feel. That suddenly feels like far more productive. And so I think part of that is just all of those nonverbal cues, the ability to connect in at work, but in a non-work setting, whereas in Zoom, we're on a meeting and then we're off the meeting and then we're back on a meeting again. So we're not gaining that kind of empathetic understanding of other people's organizations. And then finally, and this is one that I think is maybe somewhat contentious, but it's really along the theme of kind of resilience and adaptability. And I think that there's a real understanding of, or a far greater understanding now of people's mental health and the ability, the difference between kind of pressure and stress and the impact that has on individuals. And certainly as the workplace continues to change, so a lot of my colleagues are now back in, have gone back, different organizations, either part-time or full-time. That's a shift that they've had to adapt. And so certainly some professionals that I think are like newer in their careers, who maybe have grown up and have spent the last 4 years and their only experience of the world has been in remote working. That's that can sometimes struggle with that. And so thinking about how can we provide those resources or that context for learning around resilience and adaptability is something that is another key theme.
So when it comes to technical skills, I think that most employers are sort of fairly clear about how they can measure those, how they can assess those, how they can train people, how they can upskill people in those kind of areas. With soft skills, some of them are kind of almost like human attributes in a way, and from that perspective, it's like, how do you measure them, and can you upskill or train people in aspects of of some of these soft skills?
Yes, yeah, it's definitely a different I think definitely a very intentional approach is needed. And I think the reality is that I think you can certainly think about how we think about these soft skills in the context of all the learning that we do. So one of the trends that we see, obviously, as I mentioned, we're a content aggregator, so we have a lot of compliance training focus, but we will have skills development and leadership development. And what we've started to see over the last couple of years is a shift of soft skills attributes and modules being included in those compliance training. So everybody, globally has to do some sort of compliance training. And so certainly a lot of the providers now have recognized this opportunity and this skills gap. And so it's almost like by stealth, introducing soft skills like adaptability or problem solving into compliance training helps to kind of enhance that. And they're not necessarily calling it out as that, but it's an area where we can continue to kind of focus and grow. I think what we're also seeing is the use of, to your point, this kind of human learning or human attributes. I think the types of learning that we can do, whether in person or remote or hybrid, we can lean into that a little bit more. So things like simulations, real world scenarios, role playing. Certainly, if I think back 30 years, I spent a lot of my time when I was an L&D practitioner doing a lot of role plays, whether it's negotiation or sales skills or those sorts of things. So I think, you can do that online, we can do that hybrid or in person. So introducing those real world scenarios and simulations. And then finally, there's definitely a trend to micro-learning and gamification. I think kind of people respond, every learner has a different style, but what we're seeing as an overarching trend is, shorter, faster bursts of micro-learning that can be included in the flow of work, and gamification. Certainly kind of the newer generations kind of really respond to that sense of kind of fun and engagement and potential competition in terms of those learnings. So I think all of that kind of are some of the kind of tactics, but I do think it really comes down to organizations understanding their kind of the skills landscape in their organization, some of those soft skills and where the gaps may be, and thinking about building that into their leadership development and their culture of learning, if you will, at different points.
What would your advice be to employers on being able to do that? Because I know it's something that lots of people are struggling with at the moment, to actually kind of, map out and understand the skills that they have in their business.
Yeah. So I think, and this is, I think the response here is it's fairly consistent with other skill sets, but, I think kind of it's not specific just to kind of soft skills, but I definitely think it starts with intention. So I think kind of thinking about the learning culture in your organization. Do you have one? Do you want to create one? What does that mean? Thinking about the entire kind of ecosystem of learning. So whether that's mentorship, coaching, continuous learning programs, how you're providing access in general from a learning perspective. And then, very much, what I've seen best practice is executive modeling. So ensuring that, if we're saying that soft skills are important and we want employees to focus and develop on that, then our executives have to exhibit that. So whether that's kind of empathy, whether that's communication skills, etc. I think it's important for leaders to be seen, to be demonstrating that, and to be talking about that, because at every step, one of the biggest blockers to kind of L&D programs, I think, is the inconsistency between kind of what L&D is saying and what leaders are doing. So I think that's a key step. And then quite tactically, kind of the next level down, where I've seen benefits here is thinking about how do we embed soft skills into KPIs. So are we thinking about, are we measuring, for example, in our performance reviews, kind of communication, collaboration, adaptability, those skills that we say that are important and that we're putting L&D resources and focus behind, are they connected from a talent management, performance management perspective? And then, hardest of all, really, from an L&D perspective, I think is connecting that then to ROI, and thinking about, okay, within the context of my organization, how am I going to be connecting like the thin red line? I often talk about these soft skills that we're looking to improve and business performance. And so, like, how can we measure that? And that might be through the connection or attribution to customer experience, like CSAT type scores, team collaboration. Maybe that's you measure that within your employee satisfaction, ESAT, innovation, those sorts of things. So thinking about the ways that your organization currently measures and assesses itself, And then what are the ways that we can think about attributing, and we can maybe baseline improvements in some of those soft skills.
And as a final question, what does the future look like? How's the skills landscape going to develop further?
That is a great question. I think AI is clearly not going away. And so I think kind of as we see kind of greater advances on AI and greater efficiencies on the technical, more repeatable, I think there's going to be almost like a double down in terms of on non-technical skills. I think we'll all become far more literate and able to maximize and leverage kind of AI. So I do think that, my perspective is that soft skills are going to become even more of a differentiator for employees, because I think, the ability to navigate work environments, hybrid, in person, foster those relationships, drive innovation has always been key and will continue to do so. But with, greater technical tools that are able to kind of displace some of those repeatable, scalable tasks, I think kind of the differentiator really is going to be more of those interpersonal and kind of cognitive skills.
Dan, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you so much. Great to chat.
My thanks to Dan. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find and search all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com. On that site, you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.